T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5.
The early 1970s was an exciting time and saw several dramatic steps forward in science and technology. The field of neuroscience was no exception. Specifically, 1971 was a turning point in history that still influences today's world. On July 26 through August 7, 1971, Apollo 15 carries an all-University of Michigan crew of astronauts when it flies to the moon. On March 5th, Led Zeppelin played Stairway to Heaven for the very first time. And on October 1st, the Walt Disney World Resort opened in Orlando, Florida. However, arguably, one of the most electrifying events happened on March 24th, 1971. On that momentous occasion, the Executive Board of the Horace H. Rackham School of Graduate Studies at the University of Michigan approved an interdepartmental neuroscience graduate program. It is also interesting to note that the very first annual Society for Neuroscience meeting was held at the Shoreham Hotel in Washington, D.C., and the afternoon session was chaired by UM's own Bernard Agranoff on October 27th through the 30th. Since 1971, the neuroscience graduate program has seen tremendous growth, with over 270 PhD recipients to date. Now let's journey back through the hippocampal network and talk to formal neuroscience graduate program directors and take note of the challenges and advancements seen over the years.
Before being a neuroscience building, it was the food services building, so called because there was a spur of the railroad track that ran up the road heading towards where the heating plant is now. So they delivered coal to the heating plant and food to the food services building. Okay. And then when the food services was decentralized and they stopped using coal, then there was no need for this railroad track to go up there, and so the food services building became expendable. And that's when the neuroscience, when it was turned into a neuroscience building. And the neuroscience building was needed at that time. This was in about 1969, because the psychology department had just lost a very eminent neuropsychologist, physiological psychologist named Jim Olds, famous for having discovered the pleasure center in brains. And there was considerable panic that we were losing people that good. So they thought, how do we make the nervous system more visible? And it was determined that they should start a neuroscience program, because there was nothing in the university that labeled neuro anything. 3 months before the new fiscal year for the new cycle was to begin, we got a message from the NIMH that they were not going to fund our proposal. And we had 3 months to do who knows what, because there were students coming to be paid from that grant. So that was just in time for me.
Okay.
And
okay, good start.
and being very, I hadn't done any administration in the university, and so I had no idea what I do now. Am I supposed to get a new grant or pay it from my salary, or what do we do now? I was getting serious about wine, and but my at the university salary I was getting, I couldn't get very far into wine of quality. So I started making my own wine. Just you could buy a concentrate and do standard fermentation and get wine out of it. But one thing that helped, I think it probably helped recruit a few students in the laboratory, because my wife and I, would invite them over for dinner, and we'd drink a lot of wine because it only cost $0.25 a bottle as I was making it. And it wasn't very good, but it was drinkable.
Okay, so this is an interesting history. The neuroscience program at that time was not a unit within either the medical school or LS&A. It had no administrative, links to any of the colleges. It was purely a Rackham program. And so the organizational chart, the top of the organizational chart, was the dean of the Rackham School of Graduate Studies, not any of the deans of the medical schools or LS&A. which was a huge problem for many, many years with the neuroscience program, because as you know, money flows into colleges. Money doesn't flow into the Rackham to go out to units. And so money was always a big, big problem. Money for administrative support for anything. I mean, because we were sort of outside the system. The one thing when I did the interim directorship thing in 88, 89, the one thing I said I wanted to do it was to have a review committee of outside people to come in and review the program and make recommendations about exactly this kind of structural sorts of stuff. The idea, of course, of getting an outside group like that was to convince the administration here to give support to the program. Mm-hmm. And indeed, there was sort of a blue ribbon panel who reviewed the neuroscience program that year. Mm-hmm. Yes, there was a committee that came in and did a report that went to the provost and the dean of the graduate school and so on, and made nice recommendations that we would have loved if they all had have been enacted, but they weren't.
When I was director, I reported to the dean of Rackham, and in order to get funding to run the program, to basically run the administration, and which we only had a single staff person at the time, who served as that was Sharma Shoemaker, and she served as the student, basically taking care of the grad students. She also did all the accounting and, anyway. But what I had to do as director was go basically hat in hand to the dean of LS&A, to the dean of medicine, a little bit to the dean of engineering, but basically to beg for funds. So each year, in order to create a budget, I had to basically, scrape together resources from multiple schools and colleges, and Rackham, of course, put in money too. We had a training grant then, as we do now, and so it was housed in that building. So the concept then that I was trying to express about the sort of general research programs that the university was trying to create an interdisciplinary environment, not just for graduate education, but also for research.
And it was a great opportunity for me to get to know people all over campus, neuroscientists, across the entire University of Michigan campus. What I didn't expect probably is how much I wound up learning from the experience, from the students, from the process, about mentoring, about feelings about academia, about what it takes to help young people succeed. Some of the lessons have really stayed with me and have influenced me probably a lot more than I influenced anybody else. And I hope that together we nurture the love of science that the students bring to, that animates these students when they chose to be neuroscientists. I hope that they will work on keeping it alive, that we help them to keep it alive as their mentors, as their colleagues, and that they remember that science is a journey, that you don't have to be perfect. In fact, being imperfect is kind of a strength, that failing is actually part of the formula for future success. And that we've all been there, that when they hear stories of success, they can absolutely believe that there was a lot of failure behind them. And so to not feel intimidated, to not feel like they're imposters, that they don't belong, but to ask for help when they need it, and to remember that there is a lot of joy and fun along the way.
So Rich was fantastic as an associate director. So we worked on a couple of things, one of which was the boot camp. So the boot camp was instituted when I was director. Rich took over the primary role for that. We saw a lot of students that were, trained in psychology and afraid to do, they were excited about it, but they were afraid to do a rotation in electrophysiology lab. And so, the boot camp really, I think, helped that. And it's sort of I like to think of things by analogy. And one analogy that I use for the neuroscience graduate program directorship is being a plumber. And so, you have all these plumbing lines, and what's being carried is not water, but it's ideas that are being carried between people. And that neuroscience graduate program boot camp is such a great place for mixing, because you have faculty from different areas and students from different backgrounds, and they're all exploring together in a relatively non-threatening but organized activity that has a little bit of chaos involved, but just enough reward for the students that it comes out being a great mixing bowl for all of these ideas.
When I think about what my major accomplishment of director was, it let the program grow to a size that was commensurate with faculty growth, so that faculty who were willing to put some input into the program had a reasonably high probability of getting students to actually come to their lab, which is, because again, you can't get faculty to participate if the chances they'll ever see a student from the program are close to zero. So anyway, that's kind of, why, as I said, the reason I wanted to do it was because by the time I was director, I'd actually had several other students from the program. So I was getting lots of resources from the program, and I just felt obligated to give back. And it was giving back in a way I liked doing. And so I got a call from Nancy Cantor, who was the provost, who told me two things. She said, we really do care about neuroscience and you're the director of the graduate program. So I, as provost, has decided that they're building the Life Science Institute building, and they're building Palmer Common. And I was just at a meeting where the architect remarked that a third building could easily go on top of the parking lot. And I've decided that will be a building called the Undergraduate Science Building. And what would you think if we located the graduate program there? The most long-lasting accomplishment of my term as director is we got really nice space for the graduate program, and we got really nice teaching labs for my home department, which was still biology at that time. We had to split up.
Rich had done a very good job of doing just exactly what you described, negotiating with department chairs, recognizing that students were training in their laboratories. When I became director, I went back to those same sources and said, your support was great, we appreciate that. And almost to a person, I was told, but I negotiated that with Rich, not with you. And so one of the first things that happened is we lost a lot of support. But because my position was in the medical school, even though we were Rackham IDP, we were sort of the center of gravity was in the medical school. I began to discuss with the graduate school leadership about supporting the graduate program in a little more substantive way. Right. So I was the director when PIBS was created, and so then there was the PIBS admissions route, but there was always the direct admissions route that was maintained. Mm-hmm. And so that was tolerated by the medical school, let's put it that way. But the strength of the program is recognized as well, because neuroscience is one of the larger and stronger in terms of quality of the faculty, the quality of the students, admissions program, graduate programs on our campus. And so I think the medical school recognized that strength. Yes, so if I have a lasting legacy, it's the fact that I hired Valerie Smith. Yeah. So Valerie joined Charma Shoemaker and me. We were a very small operation and sort of became a 3-person office. But she had an immediate, very positive impact on the program. She's someone I've gone to every day almost since that time. She supports the faculty in a tremendous way and the students as well. And she came exactly at the right time to help me compile all the information. You just have to kind of gather and compile into the training grant application. So she helped a tremendous amount doing that.
I mean, the most memorable experiences for me were without a doubt the annual retreats. I mean, so the annual retreats, which in my time happened at Walden Woods in Howell, Michigan, or at the Kellogg Biological Station, kind of out by Kalamazoo. those were without doubt the highlight of the experience. So really peeling away from campus, heading out for an overnighter with the students, the staff, other faculty. Yes, we did a lot of science and we had posters and talks and that kind of stuff, but we also had a lot of downtime. And, you know, one of the most exciting events for me associated with the retreat was the tug of war. And the tug of war was always an opportunity. I can't remember if we pitted students against faculty or if we were intermixed or how it worked, but that was always a highlight. And so that tradition, I hope, continues. It was a great tradition and a whole lot of fun. And I think at the end of the day, if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right. So we need to be able to enjoy these experiences. Graduate years are outstanding years of one's career, and you know, I really like the retreats and the opportunity to share some of that with the students.
You know, I was always of the feeling that you should try something, and if it doesn't work, then you try something else. That you don't just go with what's there. You have to continually change to improve and change with the times. And the students are changing, right? They come in different today than they came in when I came in as a student. So I think it's normal to continue to change the curriculum, the research requirements, the opportunities, the resources that are available, the number of initiatives in terms of what types of faculty now can be brought into the program. So under me, I brought in a lot more of the biomedical engineering people, got in some of the computational stuff, because computational neuroscience and big data analytics are what we're all dealing with these days. And so it's not just the same as it was. So I think that, you know, we changed the curriculum several times. We changed the exam things several times. And sometimes they worked and sometimes they didn't. And that's what you're there to listen to the feedback from the students, see what they're struggling with, and see if you can facilitate, you know, their knowledge.
Since I've been associated with the program for such a period of time now, the students that I was here when they came in have graduated and moved on, and so, you know, I've seen a whole turnover of all of those students that are all graduating, and it's just so rewarding to see the students mature in their approach to science, in their relationships with each other, and the relationships with the faculty, how they learn to communicate, how they learn to network, and I always just feel like a proud mom, I guess, when they do their defense, because you've just watched them grow and blossom scientifically, personally, professionally, and it's just so rewarding to watch that evolution. I mean, some of them, they come in at all different levels. They come in from all different backgrounds. Some of them are unsure of their place in science, and they just grow and blossom. Others know where they want to be and they still grow, but they may have come in with more confidence. And so there's this diversity of their skill sets and where they are in their professional development. But it's so much fun to watch them mature in their approaches. As you're in the program, though, you get to meet all of these faculty, and you learn about different areas of research that aren't in your area, but you start to learn about other areas, faculty that are doing all these really cool things in neuroscience. And so you get a better reflection of the breadth of neuroscience across campus. And so you can now be the person helping the students when they come and say, well, I'm kind of interested in this. And you go, well, you should talk to this person, this person, this person, this person. So that's actually been another wonderful thing about being director, is getting to know so many of the more of the neuroscience faculty.
You know, a lot of things go on, as you know, behind the scenes that maybe aren't necessarily obvious, but we had to spend a lot of effort to transition to hybrid and virtual learning. So classes moved to very quickly to becoming virtual, and students having to log on to classes. We really fought hard, and and at times I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out, but I was really committed to trying to keep some aspect of the boot camp experience, keep some of it live and not all of it virtual. And there were people who really wanted it to be all virtual, and there were issues with safety and with the administration. Luckily, we had the support of some people in the administration and in the people who controlled the space that we use for boot camp. So it doesn't sound like a major triumph, but at the time it felt like a triumph to be able to have the boot camp, at least part of it, be hands-on. And I must say, I must have a shout out to the boot camp organizers and instructors at that time, because they were fantastic. And all of the faculty in NGP are so committed and dedicated to NGP that, you know, it couldn't work without the faculty, absolutely.